Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Talk Show. Today, we're joined with Alex from Hallow, and he's going to share with us basically a lot of the history and where Hallow, the app, is going, the #1 Catholic prayer app in the world. Really excited about this episode.
Yeah, Hallow is an app that's really taken the world by storm, and there's been over 1 billion prayers prayed through it. And we're going to find out how he got this inspiration to make this app and the kind of impact that it's having on the world.
It's been an absolute joy to follow Alex's, journey and online. The ministry that they have on this app is absolutely impressive, and each month it gets better and better.
Did you say absolutely?
I said absolutely fabulous.
Alex, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I think this would be your second time joining us, I believe.
That's right.
And since then, I can tell you, I use the app every day. There's been a lot of really rich content that's been delivered on the app. I can't even, used to be able to get to everything. Now I can't.
Well, you have really bad eyesight. It's there.
It's there.
He has his glasses attached right to the back of his
nose. I have
nose.
man eyes, as my wife says.
Look at these little things here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, we all use Hallow, as well as hundreds of thousands of other people. And this app is really kind of revolutionizing the way that people are using technology to pray, in the church, and I'm sure even people outside of the church, quite a few. So we wanted to talk to Alice and just talk about how this thing got rolling, because if you look in context and you maybe hear about like this movement or that movement in the 14th century, or there's this prayer revival in the 1800s or whatever, those are viewed as historic moments. But when you look at the magnitude and the impact of what Hallow has done, if we're talking candidly, it rivals that in the amount of prayer and the impact and the amount of people that it's reaching. And I think it can be overlooked because it's just an app, what kind of impact it's having on the world. But giving a little context to it and figuring out, why this happened and where it's going, I think will be really interesting for a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, the extent of your reach, Alex, that you have here and whom you've involved in this rollout. I mean, just like top level athletes, Jonathan Rumi, you've got Father Mike Schmidt's content on here. We have him in a votive candle, if you haven't seen it, which is my favorite devotion that we have in
Whenever Father Rich is not being
my favorite devotion,
whenever Father Rich is not living up to the high standards that Father Michael Schmitz
which is basically every single day,
we have to light this up and sing the canticle of Father Mike Schmitz, which is Sancte Padre Michael Schmitz Order Pro Nobis, right?
But no, it's beautiful. I mean, the music that you have on here, one of the features that I love is the sleep, the whole Bible stories, meditations. You've got things for kids. You have it in Spanish. I mean, it's phenomenal.
So, Alex, tell us a little bit. How'd you get started on this? Where did this idea come from?
Yeah, first off, I appreciate all the kind words. It's all the big man upstairs doing the heavy lifting. It's been a pretty the big man upstairs, and then you guys, I think, are probably 98% of the users. So you guys are you guys get a lot of credit for that, no doubt. But yeah, it's been an incredible ride. We probably last talked 2 years ago, and just talking about prayer. And I think it took us. We started about 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago, and it took us about those first 2 years, and we got to like 1 million downloads or so. And just in December, just the month of December, we had another 1 million downloads. So I think it's now up to like 7 or 8 million total. It's just been a crazy ride. Folks talking about it, sharing it. And really the coolest part is just, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but it's just these incredible stories, what God's able to do in people's lives when you just take some time and pray. And so it's really been an incredible blessing to be a part of. But yeah, how it got started. So it's pretty intertwined with my own faith journey. But so I was raised Catholic, but fell away from my faith, unfortunately, in high school and college. Would have considered myself agnostic or atheist for most of that time. And when I graduated, I got really into secular meditation. It wasn't really like I had an acute stress problem I was trying to deal with. It was just something about the spiritual life that got me really fascinated. And I started meditating. There was some secular meditation apps out there I started using. I thought they were helpful little ways to have like a guide teach you these techniques in the comfort of your own home for 10 minutes before heading to work. But every time I would meditate in secular meditation, my mind would always strangely feel pulled towards something spiritual, which, I was still agnostic or atheist at the time. So I thought it was very strange. An image of the cross or the Holy Spirit or Jesus or something. And so I thought I had this really interesting question. And I started reaching out to priests, brothers and sisters, folks who were deeper in their faith life than I was, and asked, hey, is there any way that there's some sort of intersection here between this meditation thing and this faith thing? And I thought that was a new revolutionary question, but everybody laughed at me and said, yeah, we've been doing it for 2,000 years. It's called prayer. You probably should have heard of it. Who did your CCD growing up? But for me, prayer was always, it was the things that I'd memorized as a kid, or it was, hey, tell God what you're thankful for or sorry for, which are, both really powerful prayer techniques, but had always felt like I was just talking to myself or just repeating something in my mind. Never really felt like there was a relationship of any sort. And I started learning all about this really beautiful, really powerful tradition of contemplative and meditative prayer within the church, Lectio Divina, Ignatian spirituality, Carmelite spirituality, recollection, chant, all this stuff. And I Googled how to do Lectio Divina, randomly opened up scripture. The passage where he teaches the Lord's Prayer was the passage that I randomly flipped to. And in Lectio Divina, you pick a word that sticks out to you and you meditate on it. And Hallow was the word that stuck out to me, and hallowed be thy name. And it just changed my life, brought me to tears, brought me back to my faith. It was just this really beautiful combination of this deep sense of peace, deeper than I'd experienced in any secular meditation or anything, but combined with this depth of meaning and purpose. So hallow means to make holy. Okay, well, is Jesus saying he's making God the Father's name holy? Is God trying to make me holy? Am I supposed to be hallowing God's name on earth? Am I letting God make me holy? Am I supposed to be helping other people grow in holiness? And I was just doing I was just pursuing my own career for my own interests and all that jazz. So the answer to all those questions were very stressful and very much no. And so it changed my life. It's kind of like you're wrestling with something real. It felt like there was a meat to the meditation and to the prayer that you were wrestling with, and that was talking back at you. And so anyway, I knew that I needed to do this type of thing for the rest of my life. I loved the idea of these apps just because technology is hard to pray with. I don't know. There's something about looking at a screen that's a bit, it takes me out of the zone of prayer. A book does that a little bit because you're opening and closing your eyes, but not as bad as looking at a screen. There's something about the light. But the thing about these meditation apps that I really liked is you just kind of picked a session, closed your eyes, pressed play, and it was like you just were being led in a retreat. You didn't really have to engage with the technology. It was just like there was someone there praying with you. Mm-hmm. And so we started building the first version selfishly just for me, and because I knew I needed to do this for the rest of my life. And we had some friends and family who wanted to try it out, and there were just some incredible stories of folks' lives being changed. We had 9 sessions on the app, and it was, one girl who was using the app, a young woman, decided to break up with her boyfriend of 2.5 years and commit to religious life as a nun after 9 10-minute sessions. And it was just this, we're like, man, I don't know if that's, I don't know if this app thing is going to work, but it seems like God,
that was a powerful call or a bad boyfriend.
Probably a combination of both.
This thing was probably on the edge, and it was just teetering.
It was probably both, but it speaks to something that, in Hallow, we're not inventing any new prayer methods or techniques. There's, we're using the same scripture the church has used for thousands of years, and our goal is just to help folks to connect with it and to try to pray in a new way, and to try to grow deeper in their spiritual life. And in your life, you're so often, most of the time, I have 2 young kids. You're constantly on the go. You're waking up in the middle of the night. You're working. You're on the phone. And then when you're done, you want to relax. You want to take your mind off something. So you watch Netflix, or you watch YouTube, or you scroll through TikTok, or whatever it is, or you read the news, or whatever terrible thing is going on in the world. And it distracts you, but you don't really ever rest, and you never really sit in silence. And so even just a lot of our sessions are silent. And so even just the idea of sitting for 5 to 10 minutes in silence, it's like God was just sitting there knocking on your heart for so long, and he just wanted to tell you something. And as soon as you sit down and shut up, you hear him. And but it can be hard. It can be intimidating to sit in silence for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. So, and it can be intimidating to try to, what does it mean to listen to God? What does it mean to pray contemplatively or meditatively? So, yeah, it's been a pretty incredible journey. Just watching what God's been able to do with just the little time that we give him in our lives.
Can I share my Hallow story?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I love Lectio Divina, and it was definitely something that I even considered, because we build apps and stuff too a long time ago in the history of Fusati, because I love it so much. And so I was praying in my prayer room at my house, and it was like a Saturday, and all the kids were running around. And there's a part where it's like, okay, now you talk to God. And so my father passed away 2 years prior to this. My mother, depended a lot on him and was trying to become independent and was struggling in a lot of different ways. And so, but I was trying to find her a home near me, right? I was like talking to neighbors, talking to friends.
And you're in Texas and she was in Florida.
Yeah, she's in Florida. I'm in Texas. And so there's this time where I'm talking to God, and I'm like, literally just going, dude, like how many times do you really, what do you want me to do? Like, I'm doing everything I can. I'm trying to get her a house near here. And immediately my daughter walks in and interrupts me, which happens often. So I wasn't upset or anything. So I said, hey, Ava. She goes, Jill's here, and Jill's our neighbor. And that's the one family I didn't ask, because I'm like, they're not moving. Like, we were friends, and and so Jill, I answer the door, and Jill goes, hey, we're moving. Do you want some of Reagan's stuff? And I was like, no, I want your house. Can you, So like literally in that prayer, Ava knocks on the door. I walk downstairs, and then the answer came in my head. It's like, yeah, you didn't ask your next door neighbor.
That's so incredible. Praise God. Yeah, no, we have so many stories. It's such a funny, and Hallow, the whole experience with Hallow has just been this like obvious, just wait, it's kind of like that example. It's like, just you try and you try and you try, and then finally you just give up and you say, hey, God, can you do something here? And he just does it. He was just waiting for you to give up, and he was just waiting for you to surrender to him. It was one of the interesting stories from really early on. So it's a startup, and we were working on it part-time. And some of us, a couple of us had quit our jobs. And so we were just spending our savings and racking up credit card debt and all this stuff. And so it was like 6-12 months. And so we needed to fundraise some amount so that we could keep working on it. And this was really the only thing, the only time where like Hallow was kind of do or die. Because had we had to go back and get jobs, we probably wouldn't have been able to keep working on it. And it probably wouldn't, we would have kind of wound it down or not been able to add any more content or any of that stuff. And so I ended up meeting with all these people, all these different, faith investors or angels and people in Silicon Valley and Chicago and New York and all these crazy people. It was like 80 meetings in the course of 2 weeks. And for anybody who's, fundraised before, especially for something that's super early stage or new, it's an incredibly stressful process, because it's only you in the room. They're like you don't have numbers or anything. So they're kind of just judging you. And for me, the story of Hallow is just my own faith journey. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, I guess you hate my own testimony. And so it's, and you're constantly trying to figure out, okay, well, am I sitting up straight enough? Am I giving enough eye contact? Am I doing this well enough? And, if you're really successful, of those 80 people, 10 might say, maybe. But that means 70 say no. And the 70 say no, right away. And the 10 take a while. They take like 2-3 weeks to say yes. And so I'm just in these meetings, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And I just get these no's after no's after no's after no's. And I was living in Silicon Valley at the time. And so it's just like not the hotbed of Christianity in the world. And so it was the most stressed I'd ever been, hands down. And I came back to our little tiny studio apartment, and it was, midnight, and I was sitting on our little futon praying. And I remember saying to God, I was like, look, man, this is too much. I can't handle this thing. I promise you, if this thing works, you will get the credit. I'm not going to try to take the credit. I'm not going to think I'm some successful guy who figured out how to build apps or any. I know that you're the one doing this. At the same time, if this thing fails, it's on you. I'm not taking the blame for that. I'm not taking the fall. And and maybe that's a stepping stone to something else. And, you wanted it to become something else, or to inspire somebody else, or whatever it was, or you wanted me to grow through it, or whatever it was. And so I was like, at the end of the day, this is your thing, whether it works or not. And the next day I was going to meet with somebody, and I was like, hey, I'm running late and I haven't grabbed a coffee yet. Let me go grab a coffee. I read the daily gospel because I hadn't read the daily readings yet today. And the reading was Peter trying to fish, and, he can't catch anything. And Jesus says, let down your net. And he says, there's no fish here. Why would I let down my net? And he says, no, you let down your net. And he lets down his net, and he catches more fish than the net boat can hold. And that meeting, that guy offered to invest. He's one of, our favorite partners that we've ever had. And then like 7 other people in the next 2 days offered. And it was just this perfect example of God just saying, hey, I'm doing this. Let me do it. Surrender completely to me, which has been essentially the learning of this whole prayer and startup experience. But yeah, it's miraculous what he's able to do when you give up and let him take control.
Yeah, we've experienced that too with a lot of the stories that we get from the talk show, and it becomes, especially in technology, because we're kind of in the same boat as Hallow. We post stuff online and on podcast platforms, so we don't really see or hear any of these stories. And then when they start coming at you, you're like, wow, this thing is you're doing. You can only say that he's doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like these stories are nuts.
What are some of these stories that you've heard, maybe more personal stories of people who have used Hallow? Because I'm sure you get a lot. I mean, I know that we get people all the time, even on our videos, because we worked with you so long, saying, I use Hallow, I did this, and this happened. What are some good examples of that, Alex?
Yeah, we've had, we've had just an incredible. I mean, we get a note pretty much every day of something that'll bring tears to your eyes. I mean, there was a woman who I spoke to on the phone, a couple months ago. She had taken her faith seriously. She lived in a city with her husband. They didn't have kids. She was a bit older, I think maybe 40s or 50s. And then her husband got a job out in the middle of nowhere, and she had to move to very rural Georgia, I think, far away from a church, any of her community, any of her friends. And she'd been there for a few years. And she said that she had developed, a deep depression, a deep alcoholism, dependency on drugs. Her and her husband were on, she was very hateful towards her husband. She was saying it felt like, the devil had a hold of her at every turn. And she saw some, little video or something of Mark Wahlberg saying you should pray the rosary or something like that. And I was like, this sounds weird enough. I should give it a try, or probably a Catholic talk show ad. And she downloaded it, and she said she went out to her car and she just pressed play on one of the first sessions. And she said it felt like God just laid this blanket of peace over her. And she started using it. I mean, I use it like 3 times a day. She said she started using it 9 times a day, every day. She stopped doing anything that wasn't faith-based. Her whole life tried to become a prayer. When we talked, she was 80 days sober. She had, recommitted to her husband and to trying to find a way and build a life of love and charity. And it was just this, and she had said that she was struggling deeply with suicidal thoughts. And she said she didn't think, if it wasn't for the grace that God gave her through this app, that she'd be alive here today. And it was just like what you guys were just saying. It's just such a, all we do is record a couple pieces of content, which are great and beautiful content with amazing guys. And then you let it out, and God just does these really incredible things with prayer and with the time that we give him. And so, we get a story like that pretty much every day from someone whose life has been changed, whether that's, a young man. We got, a high school boy, wrote us the other day that said, I was struggling every night. I couldn't go to bed till like 3 a.m. because I was just scrolling on TikTok. And now I close my day every day with scripture. Or like a young child who was afraid of the dark, who now listens to the little saint stories we have for kids on the app to help her not be afraid of the dark, which as like a dad of young kids is an incredible blessing to be able to be a part of someone's life like that. So it's an incredible story. Lots of folks coming back to their faith, but just an incredible story of God doing pretty incredible things.
The one thing that I've noticed too, just as a pastor and having your banner up, especially for Lent and Advent, and encouraging people to download Hallow, and then obviously a lot of the parishioners listen into the show as well. So they've heard our partnership from the beginning, really, because we've been together from the beginning, and it's touching because I see families using Hallow. I've always heard you and your family using Hallow.
Every day we do the rosary on the way to school.
It's just beautiful. Like. And the same thing, like I have a family here, they have a number of kids, and they'll put on Hallow and they'll drive.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not the most perfect rosary,
right?
But it's like, they have the rosary praying, and it's like, it's giving them that structure of prayer and devotion. And I just love that. And most recently with Father Mike Schmitz with his Bible in the Year again, starting the new year, but then also the Catechism of the Year. We have groups that are doing this together now and just like connecting digitally as well. And this is all because of the app and the centrality of having all of this stuff in the form of a library online and easily accessible. And that's what I just absolutely love. And I'm curious, like as Lent is approaching, is there anything that you guys are rolling out that's new this upcoming season?
Yeah, Lent is this is probably the most excited for any content launch I've been. The Lenten challenge. So every Lent we do something big. It's our biggest piece of content every year. We have kind of pray 40 days of Lent is the goal. So prayer, fasting, almsgiving are the 3 pillars of Lent, and how can you focus especially on prayer this Lent. This year we're also going to add a good chunk of focus on almsgiving and fasting to each week try to push ourselves in a different aspect of charity or fasting. But we'll be going through the book, The Imitation of Christ, which is just an incredible, a life-changing book. I've read it a few times, and it's just every time it just hits you so deep.
And it's always something new, and it's like, and when you're reading it, it's like Jesus is speaking directly to you.
Yeah, it's so intense. And it just cuts straight. It just cuts straight. I think it was Saint Teresa of Lisieux, but maybe somebody can fact check me on that. But she said it was, the only book next to the Gospels that cut as deep to her soul as the Gospels. It was just The Imitation of Christ was the only thing that came close, and it was. Anyway, so Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus in The Chosen, who's incredible, and then Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ, read it. You can choose from either of them through the 40 days. And then we have these, so that kind of structures it. We have different themes, so humility, temptation and perseverance, prayer, as we go through each week. We'll have Father Mike Schmitz doing homilies on Sunday to kind of set up the theme for the week. And then on Tuesdays, we have this really incredible, do you guys know Immaculée? I'm terrible at pronouncing her last name, but she's a survivor of the Rwandan genocide. Her story is incredible, just of surrender to prayer and conversion. And she'll be leading prayers on Tuesday. And then we have Mark Wahlberg, who gives on Fridays little fasting challenges. So he'll each week is a challenge to fast from something different. So fast from food, or fast from the snooze button and wake up earlier or a little bit earlier, or fast from technology or the news or whatever, waste your time or pulls your time away from prayer. And so each week we can have a little different pump up a fasting motivation challenge from Mark on Fridays, and then on Saturdays we have a session from Mother Olga on charity and almsgiving, and it's just and then we end the Lenten season with the Stations of the Stations of the Cross, which is really kind of custom, interspersing some Imitation of Christ stuff, and Holy Week. But it is just, the core of it is the imitation of Christ and how we're all called to imitate Christ, which is kind of fun because Jonathan and Jim were, imitated him on the screen, but how we're all called to imitate him in real life. But they both actually have really incredible stories of personal stories through their work of surrender and how God is pushing them to better imitate Christ in their personal lives, and which is, a very is an incredibly challenging thing when you're doing something at the scale that those guys are doing it. So, but yeah, the book is, I mean, I can't say enough. I think it's the second most read book in the Christian spiritual world behind the Bible. And rightfully so. It's just a incredible source of motivation and inspiration. And it's just really like, yeah, you're right. This is how I kind of reignite my faith life, which is pretty inspiring. So anyway, it's the most excited we've been for any piece of content. We're kind of pulling together all of the best content creators that we could find, and I think it's going to be something pretty special. So it kicks off on Ash Wednesday, and then goes for the every day throughout Lent, which will be pretty awesome.
That's awesome. And yeah, Lent is that big time. And you always see Hallow's got this great content. Now, I got a few more questions I want to ask you, but before we do that, I want to talk about our sponsor really quick, and that's Hallow. Okay. Hallow is the #1 Catholic prayer app. Over 1 billion prayers have been prayed through this app.
And if you don't have it in your phone right now, what are you doing? Go to the App Store. It's the #1 app.
So if you go to CatholicTalkShow.com/Hallow, you can try this app out free. And you can see how this has been impacting so many people's lives and see if it's going to impact yours. And we want to give a big shout out. I mean, if Hallow was here with us right now, we would tell them we love your app. We use it every day. But since we're here, we can't do that. But we just want to recommend this app because we love it. We use it. We're not just sponsors. We actually use this app.
Anyway, let's get back to the show. So more about Hallow.
So let's talk about Hallow. One of the questions I had for you is, what kind of criticism have you received? Because I know you cannot do anything good in any aspect of life without having people criticize you.
And you've received a ton of no's, and I'm fundraising right now, and I know all about that. But
he knows the no's.
I knows the no's. But yeah, that's a really great question.
Yeah, any criticisms, whether it's the content, whether it's the methodology. I know there's a couple kind of snide articles written about you, How did that feel, because I know your intentions of what you're trying to do. And let me tell you, we get criticism all the time, so we're not immune to it, We kind of lean into it, but how have you responded with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different points. Some of the more fun ones, when you're talking to somebody from a secular perspective, especially when you're trying to pitch or something like that, and often you'll get, does anybody even pray anymore? Is that even a thing? And it's like, yes, 75, 80% of Americans every week. Is anybody even Catholic anymore? And actually the rate of, there's a bunch of sad trends in the Catholic world, but one of the things that stayed really constant is the percentage of people that pray every week. It's if you look at any of the survey data, it's roughly 82% over the last 40 years has stayed pretty much flat. And the percent that identify as Catholic has grown with the population, even though the percent that go to mass has decreased dramatically, unfortunately. So anyway, that's always a fun one. We got pushed, in one of our conversations, the suggestion was that we should consider starting our own religion. And this was after I'd given my whole spiel. And I was like, did you hear my story? Was that not, it was kind of pretty focused on the whole Jesus church thing. But yeah, within the faith world, what we're trying to do is build something that can be a resource for, that is always 100% authentically Catholic and in line with church teaching in everything that we do and every piece of content that's on the app. And if there's ever any question, we have a great advisory board, a great set of bishops and priests who help us with making sure that everything on the app is 100% in line with church teaching. Now, it's not all that hard. It's for most of the content we do, it's, the rosary, or it's the daily gospel, Lectio Divina, things that have been done for hundreds and hundreds of years that are pretty well, it's pretty straightforward how you lead folks through that. But it's super important that it's always authentically Catholic. At the same time, we want to be as welcoming as possible to folks. People from different political perspectives. We have folks from around the world, a bunch of different countries. We have a bunch of non-Catholic folks who are on the app. And so we want to welcome as many people into the app as humanly possible, while inspiring and hopefully leading them deeper into their faith and into the church and into relationship with their parish. But that certainly gets hard if you don't want to. There's a lot of questions and we have a lot of, we work with a good chunk of really great guides. One of the articles that came out was, something about Mark Wahlberg, how he got in trouble when he was 15 years old and has repented for it, and all these things in the last 40 years since then. But there was some Newsweek article that says Mark Wahlberg partners with Catholic app and resurfaces his racist past or whatever, which he, apologized and repented for. So there's just a bunch of, and in the current world of, you're trying to, get clicks, you try whatever you can. But I think the cool part about the app, and the thing that gets us excited about it is, you can create a place, it's different from YouTube in the sense that everything on there is in line with church teaching and you can trust it and you don't have to try to filter out what might be dangerous or not. But at the same time, you can carve your own experience. So if you're doing, and you can personalize it to you in a way that makes sense. So if you're doing a holy hour every day, how can you grow deeper in your faith? If you haven't prayed in 30 years, if you haven't been to church in 30 years, how can you try to start praying with 30, 60 seconds? If you want to go through the catechism, if you want to go through the Bible, if you're really into Latin prayers, dive into Latin. If you're really into, Eastern traditions or Eastern prayers within the church, then diving into those. So it's being able to try to craft your own experiences is something that we learned really early on. That was really helpful. We tested the app, and actually, as you were talking, Ryan, about the Lectio Divina, our initial idea was, we had these few different types of prayer. It was 9 sessions, so we were launched with just 9 sessions, and it was like a Carmelite type meditation recollection for 3 sessions. It was Ignatian Examined for 3 sessions, and it was Lectio Divina for 3 sessions. And we thought that we would test it, talk to the 50 people who were going to use it. Everybody was going to love one, and we were going to build an app that was a Lectio Divina app or an Examine app or a Carmelite recollection app. And we talked to everybody, and everybody said, hey, man, these 3 sessions were life-changing. The other 6 were kind of lame. And everybody said, yeah, these 3 sessions changed my life. The other 6 were kind of lame. But it was an even split, exactly a third between the 3 different types, whichever one people loved, whether it was the meditation ones or the Examine, Ignatian spirituality ones, or the Lectio Divina. And so we were like, it's such an interesting point. And it speaks to the beauty of the church, because there's so much breadth and diversity of spirituality within the last 2,000 years of the church that speaks to different people at different stages in their life and to you at different times throughout your journey. I was really into Lectio Divina for a while. Adding on the rosary has changed my life. A daily rosary is incredible. The chant, whenever we launch any new chant or music on the app, always change it. So I experience it within my own spirituality, but being able to craft that kind of customized and personalized journey for wherever folks are in their spiritual life has been really awesome to see.
And I love the saints too, like the sense of like getting to know the saints in the daily gospel, and you're following along the liturgies of the church each and every day. And I pulled it up, and it was Saint Paquita, whose memorial is today. So it's really neat because you're able to have a resource that is up to date, very attractive. It's appealing to the eye. It's open and invitational to people who are not Catholic, and it's really a fabulous approach and presentation of the Catholic faith the way that it ought to be. Out of curiosity, my question is more in lines with, what do you see in the more evangelical elements of this, like reaching out to people who are not Catholic, reaching new markets, of people that may be agnostic or practicing a different, spirituality and whatnot. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, there's a few things that we've seen. There's a woman who wrote us the other day who hadn't been to any church in 30 years and started praying through the app and was inspired to go to confession and go to her first mass in 30 years. There was a Protestant seminarian who was studying to be a pastor who ended up converting and credited, prayer on the app. We have a good chunk of folks of the Muslim faith who are praying in the app, a good chunk of folks in the Jewish faith, and agnostics and atheists like I was not too long ago. I think, there's something exciting to me about spirituality and prayer as an evangelization tool, and especially as the simplicity of the app. I mean, the one thing is, the church has a tough pitch because in the app world, you call it like activation or onboarding. So when your first invitation to someone, you try to make it as easy as humanly possible for them to do. And for most folks in the faith world, it's, hey, come to Mass, this meeting with a bunch of people where we sit and stand at different intervals. We have different things memorized and we worship a piece of bread. Or come to this dark room with this guy you don't know and tell him all the bad things you've done. And both of those are like really high. Obviously, both of those have changed my life, daily Mass, confession, obviously. But they're like really scary for someone who hasn't been to Mass in a long time or ever, and who hasn't been to confession in a long time or ever. And so to instead say, hey, why don't you sit down for 3-5 minutes and just sit in silence and see if, now structure it in the right way and use the right content and all that jazz. You have to be guided in the right way, but see if there's something there on the other side. My guess is there is. He's going to convince you a lot better than I would of all the things, of the importance of Mass and confession and all that stuff. And he's going to lead you deeper into the church, into the faith, but he's a lot better evangelizer than I ever was. And I think there's something really powerful about spirituality that's also pretty interesting to folks in today's world. I think the church has, the last 2,000 years of the church's spirituality and the great mystics and all this stuff, I think is fascinating to people across Christian backgrounds and even non-Christian backgrounds. I think there's just this fascination with these really deep traditions of spirituality that the church really has better than any other faith. And I think there's also this hunger and this need. You can lead with the same type of thing, which I think, a lot of folks are doing a great job, which is the theology of the faith, the truth of the faith, and the truth of the church, and all that jazz. But I think there's this hunger also for the peace that Christ brings, especially when you see it. My little sister has, she's like a good bit younger than me. She gets like 100 notifications every minute. And it's just the amount of stress that you must, like, I get stressed just holding her phone for 3 minutes. It's just like, I'm anxious. And the amount of stress and anxiety that you must have in this digital generation is, and you hear it, like the word anxiety is skyrocketed, just in conversation among kids. And so this appeal of the peace of Christ is, I think, something that gets folks really excited. And then when you go and the last thing I'd say is something you learn when I talk to folks who have built really successful apps, whether they're secular or not. Most people, when they're building something, they ask the question, okay, why aren't people using this? Or why do people cancel? Or why are people leaving the church, as an example? Mm-hmm. And the answers you typically get are, well, it's too expensive, or I disagree with the church's teaching on XYZ difficult topic, or the sex abuse crisis, or whatever big thing, or I didn't have a good connection with my priest, or I hated my church, or whatever. And in the app world, it's the same type of thing. Why don't you use the app? Well, I don't have enough time. I couldn't figure out how to navigate, whatever it is. But the more helpful thing is actually asking the people who use it every day, even if that's a really small subset of people, asking them why they use it. and how they use it and how they found out about it and all that stuff. And then trying to get that, maybe it's 100 people download it and 5 end up using it every day. Trying to get that 5 from 5 to 6. So like, okay, well, how could we make this in a way that someone else might be able to discover the thing that you discovered that helped you? And if you can get that 5 to 6, that's, a 20% growth. And then if you get that 6 to a 7, that's a lot more useful than trying to talk to the 95 people who don't use it and saying, why don't you use it? And I think, when I go to a church in the middle of the night or an adoration chapel in the middle of the night and I see, a few people there deep in prayer, most of the time I go up, I talk to them and say, hey, why are you here? It's not, no, I think that the theological beauty of the faith, you'll have someone like Bishop Barron who's like, well, Thomas Aquinas, 5 ways, convinced me as a kid. I'm dedicated to it forever. But I think there's a lot of people who are, this is my spirituality. This is my church. That's my God. I'm here. This is how I find my peace and my meaning and my purpose in my life. This is the core of my spirituality. I could never leave this. This is my relationship with God. And I think how could we try to bring that to more people, both people who attend Mass regularly and people who have fallen away? I think it has an appeal and it has a pull that is something that gets us pretty excited about the broad scale of what God might be able to do with this app.
You ever been walking through like an airport or on a bus or a train or something, walk by and see someone using Hallow?
I was on a plane just maybe a month ago, and the guy sitting next, I was working on something Hallow related, and he goes, are you involved with Hallow? We started talking, and he had been somebody who tried to download it and then gave up, or tried it a couple times and couldn't really find something that resonated with him. And we talked for a while and figured out he wanted a daily habit of some sort of easy daily thing that he could use to dive deep into scripture. Mm-hmm. And so it was, the daily gospel thing on the app or something. So we eventually, after the 2-hour flight, convinced him to start using it, which probably wasn't the most scalable marketing strategy in the world. But
but you got that 6 to a 7. That's good, man.
Exactly.
That was number 8.
That was 7 to 8. Awesome. Well, we've appreciated working with you throughout the years. So many people, that listen to us use Hallow, and there's a lot of association between the two of us. And it's an association that we're proud to have because, what you're doing is really excellent and top tier. And like you said at the beginning of this interview, you're not creating anything new. You're making accessible the patrimony and the treasure of the church. Amen. And that's something that we've been trying to do too. You're using technology to bring people to the rich tradition of the church, and we're using humor and idiocy to do the same thing, we think, right?
And wonderful decorating from Howard, too.
Both important.
Yes. I love how when you said idiocy.
So, we've always been grateful to work with you and proud of it. And again, for anyone listening, go to catholictalkshow.com/Hallow or go to hallow.com. Either way, takes you to, all roads lead to Rome, right? And try this app out because it really is a fantastic use of technology. You can hear the inspiration behind it. You can hear it's been changing people's lives. And the worst thing that could happen is maybe you pray a couple minutes. Mm-hmm. What do you have to lose, I
think also it's like an investment. And I know a lot of, like he was saying, anxiety is a big word out there. And there's a lot of people struggling with a lot of things. And there's a lot of wounded hearts. I mean, we all have wounded hearts. This is just another avenue where prayer doesn't have to be as daunting. It doesn't have to be as like, the barrier to entry is, I think, a lot better because you're getting guided in prayers. In certain cases, you're being guided through some of this stuff. And obviously, like silence, just the encouragement of silence. There's nothing on the phone talking to you. You're just sitting in silence. Like that can do people a lot of good too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other aspect that I really want to encourage our listeners and our viewers to do is invest in things that are moving and fruitful. Mm-hmm. Right now, without any type of competition or any other type of like somebody right there trying to do something like this or better, there is nothing in the Catholic Church right now in the App Store that is this effective and this robust. And the more that we invest in Hallow, the more that this is going to be articulated in new and engaging ways. And that's what I love is just your team, Alex, all of the people that you have assembled, and the immense library, as I've mentioned before, that is already suitable on the app and available for you to enter into and be enriched, from children to different languages. Like all of the iterations of this is just continuing to impress me, and I'm looking forward to the continued investment and the growth.
Yeah, actually, we got a chance to hang out with a lot of the guys from Hallow when we were in St. Louis.
Yeah.
We were hanging out with Alessandro. We went to a arcade, and then Delacrosse played Matt Fradd in basketball and beat him by like 40 points. And I took a video out of it, and I was going to share it, and I'm like, I don't know, this was such a one-sided victory. I don't think it'd be fair to share this, you know?
Imagine what I could have done with the other if I would have had 2 hands.
I don't know. You're just probably lucky that Brandon Vogt wasn't there. You know?
Brandon Vaughn would have been draining threes all over.
Yeah, Brandon would have been killing you out there.
That's what we need to do is we have to have a mini basketball tournament of like you versus Schmitz, you versus Brandon and Matt Fradd, and mini basketball sponsored by Hallow. I mean, what do you think?
I'm down.
Did I just close that
Alessandro and I
pitch?
Alessandro's one of the co-founders. Him and I used to play all the time one-on-one. So I'd take him and I versus whoever you guys want to.
Whoa! We got some stuff going on right now. This is
Threw
great.
down the gauntlet.
I love it.
Awesome.
We have a few actually really great basketball folks on the team. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate the kind words again. It's all the big man upstairs, and we are likewise incredibly grateful to the long-term partnership that we've been able to work together on. It's funny how many people we've really, it's really just been like you guys and Matt Fradd for the last like 2, 3, 4 years or so. That's just been, it's hilarious how many folks on our team first heard about it through one of you guys, or how many people we talked to heard about it through something that you guys did. So really grateful to your guys' help spreading the word and trying to help some people pray.
Praise
Now,
God.
before we finish the show, we can't go any further without again recognizing our sponsor. That's right. Hallow. Download it today.
Go to CatholicShow.com/Hallow.
God bless you guys, and we'll see you next week.